Yes, I'm already starting. Wait, what was that? Yeah, sure, I already hit the record button. Okay, it's something about blobs, right? It's something about blobs. Well, the art isn't perfect, I mean... Yeah, I could have done a better job. I could have done a better job. Said one blob to another. Said one blob to another. If I only were a little different, I could be more like you. Said the blob that, you know, that was said to the blob that said it. Well, right? I mean, why would you want that? My life sucks. But it looks so nice. I mean, you know, let's just take, you know, just some random guy who makes art stuff on the internet and talks non-stop. I mean, that looks so cool. It's so nice. Yeah, it's hell, my friend. Said the blob to the blob. That said to the blob, I wanna be like you. To that the blob said, I wanna be like you said, you know, it's hell. But the blob that said it to the blob, that does it, thinks, you know, that's heaven. Yeah, but only because you ain't living it. And then you see, you know, you're like a round, kind of a roundish blob, and you blob around through life like... And then somebody blobs past you, but that's like more like a way more jitterish blob, you know, like more fast pace. It's just like or just like, and you think, oh, that's nice. I mean, to a bumblebee, you know, what's a bee to a bumblebee? Well, we named it Bumblebee, so there is no bumblebee, just as there is no spoon. Well, I mean, I can run around and follow bumblebees, and then I can record their pattern of flight, and then I can say, well, they have a certain, you know, it's like this kind of dance where they wiggle around and then they look for some... Maybe they just like flying like this. Maybe it's just the nicest way to blob, the way the red blob blobs for the red blob. And maybe for the kind of yellowish blob, you know, that's the nicest way to blob around. So what's the point of being a yellow blob and looking at a red blob and saying, I wish I'd be more like you. You know, if I would be a little different, you know, I could blob around like you and it would be super nice. You know, the point of being a blob is that you figure out what kind of blob are you and how are you supposed to blob around. Are you a fast-paced blob? You know, is your kind of blob the blob that, you know, should drink coffee? You know, are there any blobs that should ever take cocaine? I assume not. I've never heard from anyone who was really successful, you know, with cocaine. They just turn into assholes. Okay, you can say the same thing from sugar, you know, because these days all blobs are kind of toxic. Because the ocean that we swim in is toxic. And when the primordial soup itself is already toxic, well then how do you work yourself to a more peaceful environment and experience of the self? Well, you have to simply purify yourself. And then you realize, oh wow, look at this blob, you know. He looks like he's doing a good job. I mean, he really figured out how to blob. I mean, look at how he wiggles. I mean, that's just in total accordance to his shape. But maybe he just hates blobbing around like this, because that's just the way he's been introduced. You know, maybe he saw another blob that blobbed like this and he thought, oh, apparently that's the way to blob. And apparently, of course, leads me to the point, your parents. Your parents have shown you a certain way to live. So has teachers, school, everybody you saw in TV, in your entire life. Have fun figuring it out, right? So if one blob watched, let's say, the OC in his childhood, or her, let's just assume a blob is gender neutral, and maybe we can ask the blob what he thinks about it, and then he can, write an entire book about whatever. Call it transgender and say, hey, I'm confused, right? I think I was born into the, wrong shape. Yeah, but that's the shape you got. If you try to change that, you can never go back, my friend. But you can figure out how the way you're feeling shapes the way you're living. Which means if you feel terrible, then you have to change something. Which means you look at all the stuff that you know about yourself and that you can pick up by living life and feeling emotions, and then you reflect on all these things. You take one thing up and you put another thing down. You pick up the habit of drinking green tea and then you lay down the habit of drinking coffee, and then you realize, well, it's kind of nice, but I miss how angry and riled up coffee makes me. And then you start drinking coffee again. And suddenly it's like, boom, suddenly you're making art again. Oh, I thought I could live without coffee. Well, you cannot, because suddenly there are certain habits you just can't get rid of. Maybe just not yet. Maybe you just have to find a different source of anger. Well, that's easy to find. Just look at nature. Just look how we cripple our own nature through wearing shoes, or sitting all day, or being inside, or using technology. And then just make a choice. And what a blob may realize, that if you watched the OC in his childhood, or anything at all, or read books, that if he would read it again, at an advanced age, whenever he becomes aware of the fact that if you go back to the things that you once did and see how you feel now about it, you may actually learn something about why you turned out to be so confused. If you are being educated by shows like the OC, well, it's weird. But if you watch it 20 years after you first watched it, you may actually learn something. I don't have to read a lot of books. I just go back to the things that I used to do, because now I have spiritually awakened. That's how I feel, suddenly it's like there was a transition. It's like, whoop, whoop, I shifted. Suddenly, I feel more whole. Well, wait a second. What suits me? What fits to me? What kind of blob am I? And what have I been dreaming until now?